A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. This is the Second Amendment, and this is the Gun Guy.
Boom, 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 boom. Bang, 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 bang. Boom, 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 boom. Bang, bang, bang.
With Guy Relford on 93 WIBC.
And good evening. I'm Guy Relford. This is the Gun Guy Show on 93 WIBC. Thanks for joining us this evening. As always, we've got a lot to talk about. First, I want to get into what we saw in Congress this week, where after several failed attempts at gun control, after several proposals like adding American citizens to no-buy lists by taking their Second Amendment rights away from them without due process, like expanded background checks, like proposals for assault weapons bans. After these failed this week, we saw a group of Democratic senators or Congress people do what? Stage a sit-in. And have you seen the pictures of this? Because this is hilarious. Some of my favorite pictures I've seen from Congress in recent memory were the ones of the sit-in, because what you had is you had people in $1,200 suits or $5,000 dress suits, business suits, sitting on the floor of Congress like petulant children, like little kids. They all had a kind of a sour look on their face, and they're sitting on the floor with pouty looks on their faces. And for the life of me, it looked like timeout in kindergarten. It was really hard to believe these were actually adults, because they're completely acting like children. In fact, I saw on Alan West's Facebook page, I don't know if he was originally responsible for it or not, but a Photoshop picture where these congressmen all had pacifiers in their mouths as they were sitting on the floor. And it was perfect. It was perfect because the will of the American people prevailed, and these gun control proposals were defeated in Congress. And so the Democratic response was to sit on the floor and pout. And we're going to get into some of the specifics of what those proposals were and get into some of the details about what they would really mean for American citizens if they were passed. But I had to share how much I enjoyed the experience of seeing these spoiled elite members of Congress sitting on the floor pouting. It wasn't a productive exercise for them. Speaker Ryan just adjourned the House early for the 4th of July recess. And I chuckled over that too. So, okay, we've got timeout. We're sitting on the floor, and we get out of that because it's time for recess, which is exactly how it played out. But let's even talk about what proposals they're pouting over not having passed. One of them was for universal or quote unquote expanded background checks. Well, I want to make sure that people understand what we're really talking about when we're talking about universal background checks. Because first of all, let's get a couple of misconceptions out of the way. If you buy a gun from a federal firearms licensee, you go through a background check. Period. End of story. If that FFL, that federal firearms licensee, doesn't subject you to a background check, they're looking at 5 years in a federal prison and a $250,000 fine. So you go through a background check when you buy a gun from an FFL, and it doesn't matter where that is. Well, what about the gun show loophole? Can't you go to a gun show and buy guns without a background check? Well, not from an FFL. What about over the internet? Oh, I know, because the Democrats are constantly telling the world, oh, you can buy a gun over the internet without a background check. No, you can't. Not if it's from an FFL. And in fact, a private individual can't sell you a gun and ship it across state lines without violating federal law. So if we're talking about FFLs, federal firearm licensees, they all involve background checks. All those transactions, 100% of them. So, okay, so let's look at the proposals to expand background checks to transactions between private individuals. You hear opposition to that, and you hear N.R.A. talk about, well, that would include transfer of firearms, from grandfather to grandson, or neighbor to neighbor. And is that really necessary? And isn't that an unnecessary burden? Well, that's a valid point. But let's get into the real nitty gritty of what expanded background checks or universal background checks would really entail. There is simply no way, and there's a memo from the Department of Justice after Sandy Hook to the president that says this exact thing, that makes this exact same statement of fact, and that is that there is absolutely no way to enforce a universal system of background checks between private individuals. There is no way to enforce it without a universal system of registration. Why do I say that? How does the government prove, if I go out into the parking lot of my business and sell another private individual a gun, if that gun's not registered with the government somehow, registered to me, a public record available to law enforcement that tells them who owns that gun, how do they ever determine if I sold that gun or transferred that gun to someone else with or without a background check? How do they prove that? They can't prove that. They have to know who owns, who possesses every gun in the country to then control and monitor and potentially enforce a requirement for background checks. If they don't know who owns everything, just like vehicle registration, like when a gun is produced, it's registered to the manufacturer. If it's transferred to a wholesaler or a dealer, it's transferred and registered. And when it's sold to an individual, it's registered to that person. And that person wants to transfer. It has to be re-registered to that transferee. And specifically, if you imposed a system of universal background checks, you would have to supply proof that you conducted a background check before you transferred that gun to the person you're transferring it to. That's the only way you enforce a universal system of background checks. Every gun would have to be registered before you have an enforceable system for universal background checks, even among and between private individuals. Well, then the question becomes, how do we feel about a system of universal registration, where every gun is registered with the government so that the government knows exactly who owns every gun in the country? Because make no mistake, that is absolutely required for any enforceable system of universal background checks. It's the only conceivable way it can be enforced. So how do we feel about a universal system of registration? Do we want the government knowing 100% who owns every gun in the country? Well, first of all, that'll never happen. That's not a realistic scenario. Why? Because who's not going to register their guns? Even if there's a requirement. You know what? We're going to create this database of registrations, and everybody has to register their gun. If you don't register your gun, you're committing a crime. Okay. Who's going to go in and register their guns to avoid committing a crime? Well, law-abiding citizens. Because if there's a statute that's passed and someone says, hey, if you don't register your gun, we can put you in jail. Well, who doesn't want to go to jail? Who wants to remain law-abiding? Who cares about their reputation in the community? Who cares about keeping their job? Well, you and I, the law-abiding gun owner, who's not going to register their guns? Well, people who don't abide by the law. Who are they? Criminals. So you've got a system where the government now owns a database, maintains a database that contains the name and the registration of all the lawful gun owners. Why? Because we're the only ones who would go register our guns. And some of us might even not, just in protest of the fact that they have the damn registration database to begin with. But who's not going to register their guns? The criminals. How much good is that going to do? And that is exactly the system that is being proposed when we're talking about universal background checks. You can't have universal background checks without universal registration. And there's no such thing as universal registration because the bad guys won't register their guns. So yeah, background checks sound great. I don't have a problem with background checks. Do I want bad guys getting guns? No, I don't want bad guys getting guns. Are background checks necessarily a bad thing? No. I'll pass a background check. I do every time I buy a gun. I ought to be able to pass a background check to buy a gun. I don't have a problem with filling out the 4473 in a gun store to get my gun. But what I don't want is a completely ineffective and partial registration of guns owned by only law-abiding citizens who shouldn't have to be monitored to begin with, because if I care enough about following the law to go register my gun in compliance with this proposed law, I'm a generally law-abiding citizen anyway. But none of the bad guys are going to register their guns, and they're the guns we're supposedly concerned about, the ones that are going to be used in crimes. So the issue here is how we really feel about universal registration. And when you see national polls, some percentage of Americans favor increased background checks. Well, what if those polls included what I just explained, which is the requirement of universal registration for an enforceable system of universal background checks? All right, we're going to take a break. We're a little past the quarter hour, so we're a little late going into the break. I want to take your calls. What do you think about this issue or anything else going on with guns? Tell you what, you can't turn on the radio or the TV without being inundated about what's going on right now with gun control. So you want to talk about assault weapons bans, you want to talk about background checks, you want to talk about no-fly, no-buy lists, anything you want to talk about, you join the discussion. It's 239-9393, 239-9393, or contact me on Twitter at Guy Relford or at the Gun Guy Facebook page, which is just Gun Guy WIBC. So please join the discussion. Give us a call. We'll get you right on the air to talk about what you want to talk about. But in the meantime, this is Guy Relford on the Gun Guy Show on 93 WIBC.
Second to none on the Second Amendment. This is the Gun Guy with Guy Relford on 93 WIBC.
Well, welcome back to the Gun Guy Show. This is Guy Relford on 93 WIBC. And tonight we're talking about, as always, firearms, anything you want to talk about on the issue of guns. And on that note, we got some people on the phone line, so let's go right to the phone lines. We got Bob. Bob, welcome to the Gun Guy Show, buddy. What you got for us?
Hey, Guy, I sure appreciate it.
Absolutely. What you got?
Well, before I have a stroke, I wanted to bring up something that nobody ever brings up.
What's that?
Even pro-gun people. Is they're always saying, especially Whoopi Goldberg on The View.
You don't actually watch that, do you, Bob?
Only because they say keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Yeah, right.
That's the only reason.
I don't know. I watch that group. I don't think I could eat for a month. Maybe that'd be a good diet for me, as people make me nauseous. But yeah, what in particular?
Well, she's on there almost every week saying how there's no purpose for assault weapons. Nobody has a right to own one. You can't hunt with them. Yes, you can hunt with them in some states, and especially coyotes. When you got 5 or 6 coyotes chewing on a deer carcass,
yeah,
you know how hard it is. You need more than one shot with a muzzle loader.
Sure.
Anyway, real quick, the last riot we had, I think, was in Baltimore, but we had them in N.R.A. and the Watts, and we've had riots before.
Sure.
And when we got 50 to 100 people trying to break down the door of your business or your home, you need more than one shot with a 22 bolt-action rifle, you stupid morons.
Yeah,
not you.
No, I didn't take it that way, Bob. No, hey, listen, I agree with what you're saying, and the bottom line is a couple of things. When you hear people talking about what guns you need, or I need, or anybody needs, and we hear that all over the place on the media, invariably from people who know absolutely nothing about firearms. We're here, no one needs a military-style assault rifle. Well, first of all, military-style assault rifle is very specific. That's a fully automatic or select fire firearm capable of fully automatic or burst fire that has been tightly regulated in this country since 1934 and largely banned since 1986. So true military-style assault rifles are already, for the most part, out of the hands of civilians unless you go through the whole NFA process, go through an additional background check, and pay the government a huge fine, or fine, bribe, whatever you want to call it, of $200 for a tax stamp. So when we're talking about semi-automatic rifles that simply look aesthetically like a true military-style firearm, I get a huge kick out of people, whether it's on the internet or on the media or in Congress or anywhere else, telling me what kind of firearm I quote-unquote need. Two thoughts. One is, last time I checked, it's called the Bill of Rights, not the Bill of Needs. I have constitutionally protected rights, and the Supreme Court of the United States in the Heller decision said those rights extend to firearms that are, quote, commonly used by American citizens for lawful purposes, end quote. There's somewhere around 12 to 14 million so-called assault weapons, as the left would define them, in the hands of American citizens right now. There's somewhere around 4 to 6 million AR-15s in particular. Does that sound like perhaps it's a commonly possessed firearm for lawful purposes by American citizens? That's what it sounds like to me. And the Supreme Court of the United States says that, therefore, that's protected under the Second Amendment. But there's a more fundamental issue here, though, too. How in the world have we gotten ourselves into a place where people who know the very least about the subject matter are the ones telling us what we need? I had a Facebook exchange one time, and I don't get into these exchanges a lot on Facebook. They can be huge time sucks where you get involved and all of a sudden, either just got to walk away or devote half your day to some moronic debate. So it's just not worth going down that rabbit hole for the most part. But I made one comment and I got no response. So it was exactly what I was looking for, which is I made my point and the other side shut up. But it was this. I had somebody going on and on saying no one needs this, that, or the other thing. And in this particular case, it was no one needs an AR-15. And I just kind of went through my background a little bit. And I said, you know what? I'm a certified firearms instructor. I own a firearms training company. I'm a Second Amendment attorney. I'm the author of Gun Safety and Cleaning for Dummies. I've taken thousands of hours of training over the last 25 years in the safe, and efficient, and effective use of firearms. And with that background, I have made the decision, I have selected an AR-15 to be among the firearms that I've chosen as the most effective tool to defend my home and my family. That's been my decision. Please tell me your background, your credentials, and your experience that makes your judgment on that issue superior to mine. I've chosen to defend my home and my family with a particular rifle, an AR-15. Please tell me, sir, what expertise you have that tells me I've made the wrong choice. Because in your opinion, I don't need that particular firearm. First of all, I don't have to justify my lawful possession of a firearm to anybody. I'm not going to even get in the debate of what I need or don't need. That's my decision. You can butt out. And if I wasn't on the radio, I would phrase that slightly more strongly. Having said that, I've made a decision to possess a particular lawful firearm. I don't need your opinion on whether you think I legitimately need that or not. All right, let's go right back to the phone lines, and we've got Bill. Bill, welcome to the Gun Guy Show.
Well, hi, Guy.
How are you, sir?
Good.
Okay. What do you got for us?
I got a question for you, but I want to say something first.
Okay.
I just turned 72, and beginning when Kennedy was shot, the first thing that happened was the gun ban folks came out of the woodwork. And
yeah, never let a good crisis go to waste.
No, and they're going to ban this, ban that, and all that. And finally, they settled on stopping mail-order rifle sales. But it isn't never going to stop. That those little pea-brained intellectuals that grow up in Boston, New York, L.A., San Francisco, they've never held a gun, they've never shot a gun, but they're ultimate experts. They've never been in the military, and I'd like to see their I demand to see their credentials on how their opinion is going to affect my life.
Yep. Yep. And hey, and Bill, I hate to interrupt you. Do me a favor. We need to head into a break. We're at the bottom of the hour. Will you mind holding on for me? Because I know you got some other questions, and I don't want to lose those questions. But we got to head into a break, and so forgive me for that. Hey, join the discussion. 239-9393, 239-9393. You can call also just pound 9393 from a cell phone. Give us a call. Join the discussion. Contact me on Facebook at Guy Relford. Excuse me. Facebook at Gun Guy WIBC, or on Twitter at Guy Relford. So join the discussion. Give us a call. We'll be right back. This is Guy Relford on the Gun Guy Show on 93 WIBC.
The show about gun rights, gun safety, and responsible gun ownership. This is The Gun Guy with Guy Relford on 93 WIBC.
And welcome back. I'm Guy Relford, and this is The Gun Guy Show on 93 WIBC. And before we took a break, at the bottom of the hour, we were talking to Bill, and Bill made a very cool comment, which, by the way, that I did not know, or had never heard, that after the Kennedy assassination, that actually led to a gun control measure of sorts, which was the banning, quote unquote, of mail order rifle sales. Which, and I'd seen like ads from way back when, like Sears selling rifles and shipping them mail order. And at one point, I believe you could buy a Thompson submachine gun mail order. But I don't remember that happening much or seeing much advertising or whatnot for that after the 60s or so. So Bill, you may be dead right on that. But welcome back to the Gun Guy Show, buddy, because I think you had another couple of questions.
I sure did, and that was a 1995 Mannlicher on special that
that Lee Harvey Oswald used?
Bought.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, I think you had some questions about self-defense, did you not?
I was in the car one day, and there was a promo on one of the stations. I had WIBC on the radio for 55 or 60 years, and what the promo was is a website, and they said the 10 things you need to know, every gun owner in America needs to know in case someone is breaking your house and they cops have to pick up a corpse out of the entrance foyer.
Yep.
To see, and they wanted you to subscribe to something. And what are the 10 things that you're going to say when the cops get here and pull the creep off your foyer?
Yeah, great question, Bill. And I know the ad that you're talking about because I've heard it too. The ad is actually for the U.S. Concealed Carry Association and a publication they put out where they talk about, 10 things you got to know if you're involved in a self-defense shooting. But the short answer, and I don't have time to go through all 10. I actually just today taught a class called Personal Protection in the Home, and taught it up at Indy Arms Company. Had a great class, full class, and it included not only the shooting exercises you need to defend yourself, to develop the shooting skills you need to defend yourself in your home, things like shooting from cover, kneeling from cover, point shooting, rapid sight acquisition, a bunch of shooting skills. In addition to that, we also got into the kinds of things covered, at least from the description in the ad, in that publication. What you need to know. Primarily, it's, for instance, one thing is, you will be treated as a suspect in a homicide immediately by the police and likely by the prosecutor's office after a self-defense shooting. Why? Because it is a homicide. The intentional killing of a human being is a homicide. The question is whether it was a justified and therefore legal homicide. But a lot of folks don't really understand or anticipate that they're going to be treated as a suspect in a homicide, even if they use their gun in self-defense. Some of the other things you need to know, for instance, is how to interact with law enforcement. What do you say or not say when that first responding officer shows up? What do you say on the 911 call that's recorded, that's going to be there for all posterity? What do you say or not say in that 911 call? Okay, when do you say that you'd like to have your attorney present? When do you give your statement? Do you do it on the scene or substantially after that? So in order to answer the question about the 10 things, I don't know the exact 10 things they're talking about, but I could put a list of 10 things together and be 99% certain I'm going to talk about the same things. And I know USCCA. I'm a member of USCCA. It's U.S. Concealed Carry Association. And I'm actually in the USCCA network of attorneys. So if you go to USCCA for a referral for a self-defense attorney, I think I'm one of 2 lawyers in Indiana who are listed out there on their website. So let's leave it at that for now, Bill. And welcome to call back in or sign up for one of those courses, and we'll get into more detail. But for right now, we got to go back to the phone lines, and we got Don. Don, welcome to the Gun Guy Show.
Hi, thank you.
What you got for us?
Well, all these people that want to take our guns away and all that, they're against the guns. How many of those, the politicians, and who are they? Not that you would reveal the information if you did know. How many of those have gun permits or walk around with bodyguards?
Well, they all are going to be protected by bodyguards because they're in Congress. If we're talking about members of Congress, so they're all going to have armed security because the Capitol building is one of the most closely guarded buildings in the world. So they're whether they have personal bodyguards or not is going to depend, I think, on the individual. I'm sure some of them do. I would guess some of them don't. There are records. In some states it's public, in other states it's not, on who has licenses to carry or concealed carry permits or whatever the nomenclature is in that particular state. But invariably, those folks who call for strict gun control are typically those individuals who know the very least about guns. And we know that from the legislation they propose. When you read the legislation they propose, you read it and you say, no one who understands squat about guns could have written this legislation. And some of the statements, we've all seen the video of the state legislator in California talking about ghost guns. And he gets so confused just trying to be emotional about how horrific these assault weapons are and these so-called ghost guns and whatnot that he makes a complete absolute fool out of himself. There was a legislator in Colorado who talked about, we need to ban these high capacity magazine clips, she called them. Because you got to understand, if we ban the new sale or manufacture of them, they'll basically eventually all get used up because they're ammunition. And once you use them up, then they'll be gone, not even understanding how a magazine functions in a gun. And this is somebody proposing legislation. So I agree with you, Don, in that these folks are, whether they're gun owners or not, they typically know the very least about guns, and that's why they're afraid of guns. Or they have constituents who are simply afraid of guns, and that's what they use to push for gun control. All right, let's go right back to the phone lines, and we've got Robert, I believe. Robert, welcome to the Gun Guy Show.
Thank you for having me.
Sure, buddy. What you got?
Well, I'm originally born in Texas. And I moved up here to Indiana with my wife 7 years ago. I retired from American Airlines and down in Florida, and we moved up here being closer to our family. And I told her, I said, I'm not moving into a state that's not pro-gun.
Yep.
And I said, all the states I've lived in, it was always been pro-gun. And I said, I've met so many people, and I have a lot of friends that are very anti-gun, but they don't know what the hell they're talking about. It's huge, I mean, they listen to all the propaganda that's put out by the Obamas and the Clintons, and that's like a big mafia to me.
Yeah. But I bet you've been happy with living in Indiana as far as how pro-gun we are, haven't you?
Oh yes, I'm very positive. I go to a lot of the gun shows. I'm a member of the OGCA and such as that. I'm an old guy. I've been dealing with guns since I was 10 years old.
Yeah, no, understood. And I'll tell you, actually, Robert, and you may know this from having lived both places, Indiana actually has quite a bit fewer restrictions on where you can and can't carry a gun, for instance, than Texas does. In Texas, you can't carry a gun into a place that serves alcohol. In fact, I believe Texas has a zero tolerance rule in terms of having any level of alcohol in your system at all and being in possession of a gun. If a building owner in Texas puts a particular sign up, the sign's designated by statute, but if they put that particular sign up at the entrance to their business or their building, it's a crime to carry a gun in there. Where in Indiana, a business owner or property owner is just declaring their policy on whether they allow guns or not. If you violate that policy, they can kick you out. And if you refuse to leave, you're trespassing. But if you leave, it's no harm, no foul. You're not committing a crime by ignoring a no gun sign. In fact, there are many of us who consider ignoring no gun signs, not where it's a crime to carry a gun, but where it's simply a policy to not carry a gun there. A lot of us violate those signs somewhat of as a hobby. Okay. And by the way, the most common no gun sign I see looks like the black outline of a handgun. It looks like a Beretta 9mm, a 92F, and with the international no symbol through it. I just consider that to be a no Beretta sign. If I'm not happening to be carrying a Beretta, I don't think that sign applies to me, but that's just my theory. All right, we're at the quarter hour. We've still got more folks on hold. We will get to you right after the break, so please have patience with us, but we need to take a break here at the 3/4 hour. Join the discussion, 239-9393, 239-9393. Contact me on Twitter at Guy Relford or on Facebook at Gun Guy WIBC. We'll be right back. This is Guy Relford on The Gun Guy Show on 93 WIBC.
Now you've got a gun guy. Guy Relford on 93 WIBC.
More Joe Bonamassa. Love it, love it, love it. All right, this is Guy Relford on The Gun Guy Show on 93 WIBC. And we've already had a tremendous number of great calls, and we're going to go right back to the phone lines. And we've got Mike. Mike, welcome to The Gun Guy Show, buddy. What do you got for us?
Hey, Guy, I tell you what, love the show, and I tell you what, whenever I get to listen to it, but for us long-distance callers, could you get us a 1-800 number?
You know, that's you know what? I think there is a 1-800 number. I'm going to have to check into that.
Okay.
I'm just coming up on my 1-year anniversary, so you wouldn't expect me to actually know all the information to do my job here. But that's a good point, Mike. I think there probably is one out there. But what do you got for us tonight?
Oh, okay. Just my question is, do you have to be a certified gunsmith to make gun parts without, getting in trouble?
Actually, no. You can actually not only make gun parts, quote unquote, but make whole firearms. According to the ATF, as long as they are solely for personal use. And I don't know if there's a number limit on that. That's something I've never looked into. But the ATF specifically says you can make your own firearms, even functional firearms, as long as they are for personal use only. Now, you can't ever transfer them. If you transfer them, you sell them, you do anything with them other than for your own personal use, it's going to be illegal. But yeah, you can actually build guns yourself and not be in trouble with the law. All right, let's go right back to the phone lines. We got Bob. Bob, welcome to the Gun Guy Show.
I sure appreciate it. I'm not trying to hog the phone lines.
No, it's all good. What do you got for us?
Well, real quick, 1992 in Rush County, I was arrested for pulling my handgun to protect myself, self-defense.
Okay, so you didn't pull the trigger, you just pulled the gun?
I just pulled the gun and pointed it at him. I got arrested for criminal recklessness with a handgun, thrown in jail. It cost me $2,500 for an attorney, which is cheap.
Yeah,
and I waited 1 year. Yeah, I waited 1 year every day wondering what's going to happen to me. I was looking at 5 years in prison because this guy threatened to beat my ass. I was sitting in my car, and he jumped the fence and ran out in the street to beat my ass. And I pulled my little .25 auto out of my back pocket. Wasn't an AR-15. I said, "You get the F away from me, you effing bastard." And he about fell down in his tracks. But I was pulled over at gunpoint on the way home by 2 sheriffs and thrown in jail. And then my face and name was on the front page of my local paper. Local man arrested for criminal recklessness with a handgun, possession of a large hunting knife, brass knuckles, which was the end of a hacksaw blade.
Yeah, so ultimately the charges get dismissed?
I was found not guilty, but you live every day wondering what's going to happen to you. You're guilty till proven innocent. You're not innocent till proven guilty.
Yeah.
People need to get this through their thick skulls. You're guilty till proven innocent, and by God, it's going to cost you big money to prove that you're not guilty. And then they don't put it in the paper when you're found not guilty, but they sure put it in the paper when you're found arrested for something. And everybody assumes, even my own dad, God rest his soul, thought I was guilty, thought I was a nut.
Well, at the end of the day, Bob, buddy, we're glad that justice prevailed and you were ultimately found not guilty. And I understand what you're saying as far as having to prove your innocence or certainly feeling like you do. I mean, our system of justice, and if you have a competent attorney, then you always want to put the burden back on the prosecution because the state has to prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. They have to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Publicly, it's a whole nother deal. And that's probably one of the 10 things you have to know if you're involved in a self-defense encounter. That's in the USCCA book because we certainly cover it in my classes. And that is that even if you're found not guilty or even if charges are dropped, a lot of times that's not publicized or the court of public opinion has already turned against you. I give you George Zimmerman in the Trayvon Martin shooting as an example of that. Now, he's been a complete knucklehead, and he's turned the court of public opinion against him anyway. But even during that trial, he certainly accomplished that on his own. All right, I'll tell you what, we're going to head into a break here at the top of the hour. So continue to join the discussion. If you're on hold, please hang on. We're going to get to you. But when we come back, we're going to talk to a gentleman from the Indiana State Trap Association, Clarence Mason, about an event they have coming up. So we're going to duck out of the political conversation for just a bit and talk about a really cool event for you trap shooters coming up at Indiana Gun Club here sooner than later. So stick around, join the discussion, give us a call. This is Guy Relford on The Gun Guy Show on 93 WIBC.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. This is the Second Amendment, and this is The Gun Guy.
Boom, 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 boom. Bang, 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 bang. Boom, 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 boom. Bang, bang, bang.
With Guy Relford on 93 WIBC.
And welcome back. I'm Guy Relford. This is the Gun Guy Show on 93 WIBC. And we're going to continue with callers right now. We've got a special guest here in the studio we're going to get to in just a minute, but we've had some folks who are on hold for quite a while and want to get to the phone lines. And first of all, we got Kent. Kent, welcome to the Gun Guy Show, buddy.
Hi, Guy.
Howdy.
I had two questions I wanted to ask.
Okie doke.
With the deal with due process and losing your Second Amendment rights in the news this last week, and it's one thing that's always bothered me is I don't fully understand when there's been an ex parte or restraining order lodged against you. How is it that you lose your Second Amendment rights without any kind of due process?
Yeah, well, it's a great question, and actually the way and for the folks out there who hear the term ex parte order, what we're talking about
was in St. Louis. I lived in Missouri.
Yeah, understood. Well, no, when we use the same term in Indiana, what it is if somebody needs what we call an order of protection, what some people call a restraining order, but the correct term here is called an order of protection. Somebody can go down, and it's an ex parte. Which is just Latin. All it means is by yourself. So in other words, I can go down if I need a restraining order of protection. I can go down, especially against, say, a domestic partner. I can go down and fill a form out at the clerk's office at the courthouse and file that. And if what I've put on that form meets the requirements to get an order of protection, that order of protection issues, and it's ex parte, meaning the other side isn't involved. They don't get a chance. At that time, at that stage of the proceedings, to contest what I've filled out on that form in terms of why I need an order of protection. That's why it's ex parte. But the reason it's been found to comply with due process is that you then are scheduled automatically for a hearing once that issues so that you can come in and contest that ex parte order, and it doesn't become a full order And it depends on what state you're in. In most states, it should not have the effect of depriving you of your Second Amendment rights until there is a hearing, and you can come in, you can be represented by counsel, you can present your own evidence to attempt to prove why there should not be a order of protection against you.
And then my next question is then, if I the other party that had lodged this against me did retain counsel, and so then I asked the judge, I didn't have any money for a lawyer, so I asked for one to be appointed to me, and they said, no, this is a civil situation. So if it's a civil situation and I could not be represented, then how is a civil situation affecting my Second Amendment rights?
Yep, fair enough.
Basically, what they wanted me to submit to the ex parte and not fight it, and they were not going to let me, have any counsel.
Yeah, well, again, you do have the right to take counsel in there. You just don't get one appointed because it's not a criminal matter. But that's actually the answer to your question, and it's through a federal statute that a lot of people call the Lautenberg Amendment. That was an amendment to the Firearm Owners Protection Act 1986 that established that someone subject to an order of protection, if the order of protection protects certain classes of people, including spouses or ex-spouses or someone you've lived with, someone you've had a child with, and it defines certain classes of people, and if you're subject to an order of protection and the order of protection protects a certain class of people, then you do lose your Second Amendment rights. But none of that goes into effect in terms of the real ramification against you until you had the opportunity for a hearing. I understand the frustration because it's a civil matter, so you don't have a right to an appointed attorney, and it depends on where you are. Now there are other things available to you like legal aid and other ways to go get a lawyer at no expense if you qualify and if you can arrange that. But you do at least have the right to a hearing, and that's why we have that law. Am I saying that's not abused in some cases? No, I'm not saying that. Do I say it's always fair? I'm absolutely not saying that, because I have clients who call me after orders of protection have been entered against them and who were told they wouldn't lose their Second Amendment rights if they, say, didn't contest the order of protection. And then lo and behold, they turn around and they did lose their Second Amendment rights. And now they're trying to see what they can do about it after the fact. I talk to those people regularly. So it's not a perfect process. And part of the problem with the process is this. It's almost a political one. In other words, so let's say someone files for an order of protection against you saying that you've been abusive. You've been physically abusive. And you dispute that. You say, no, I have not. I have never been abusive. Okay? And you go in and have a hearing. That judge, and I understand this. I completely get it. That judge is looking at that situation, and he or she, as judge, is weighing the credibility of the witnesses. They're considering whatever evidence is presented to them. But this is always going to be a consideration. They're going to sit there and they're going to say, okay, what are the ramifications to me as judge in terms of my reputation in the community, in terms of people's evaluation of me as a judge, in terms of how I do my job? So what are people going to think of me if one of these two things happen? If I say, you know what, I'm not sure about this, but if I enter the order of protection and I take that person's Second Amendment rights away, what are the downsides to me as judge? Virtually none. Zero. Okay. Now that one person's not going to be very happy with me. What are the ramifications to me? And by the way, I'm not being critical. I completely understand why judges would look at this situation this way. What are the ramifications to me as judge if I don't enter the order of protection, if I deny it, and after that, the person seeking the order of protection gets murdered by the person sought to be protected against? Now what are the downside to me as judge? I'm the judge who denied the protective order to the person who was then murdered by the person she was trying to be protected from. What are we going to say at that point? We're going to say society let her down. We're going to say the judicial system let her down. And me as a judge let her down. That I as a judge let her down. That's the criticism. And most of us would look at that and say, well, that's legitimate criticism. So which side are they going to err on? Now, again, I know judges out there are trying really, really hard to weigh the evidence and do their best job. But the simple truth of the matter is that it's a lot worse off for them as the judge to get it wrong on the side of not issuing the protective order. So an awful lot of them, I think, get granted under somewhat questionable circumstances because, and we as society, I completely agree with this, we as society need to protect women in particular from abusive boyfriends and husbands or ex-husbands or whoever it might, stalkers, whoever it might be. We need to protect those people. And do we need to do a better job of protecting those people? Unfortunately, occasionally, people get caught up in that system and have their rights taken away. All right, I'll tell you what, before we get into the break, and we're gonna talk to Clarence Mason from the Indiana State Trap Association after this next break. But before we do, we're gonna take one more call, and we've got Scott. Scott, welcome to the Gun Guy Show.
Hey, buddy, how you doing?
Good. Good to hear from you.
Well, last week I was involved for the first time in my life in a road rage, and I was the victim. I do not have a concealed carry. I'm a veteran. I do have weapons at home, but I don't carry one in my vehicle. I just want to know, I simply tried to make a turn in front of this vehicle. He got pissed off, apparently. I stayed on my side. And waiting for a red light to turn green, all of a sudden he comes through my left window, which was rolled down. He just starts assaulting me, completely assaulting me. Now, the cops are pretty cool about it, although initially they wanted to charge me with mutual battery. And it's like, look, I'm the victim here. I'm not comfortable with that. They changed their mind on it. But what would have happened if I had pulled my gun, if I had a concealed carry, and shot the guy at that point in time? He was from waist up inside my vehicle beating the hell out of me.
Yeah, well, great question. And Scott, let me tell you exactly what the law is on this point. And that is that Indiana law justifies the use of deadly force. And if there's a gun involved, it's deadly force. All right, so you pull a gun. There's one case in Indiana that even says pointing a loaded gun at someone creates a substantial risk of serious bodily injury, and that's the definition of deadly force. So if there's a gun involved, it's deadly force. We justify the use of deadly force in certain discrete circumstances. I say we, that's the state of Indiana. And one is if you reasonably believe that deadly force is necessary to prevent serious bodily injury to you or a third person. Another is to prevent the commission of a forcible felony. And another one is to either prevent or terminate an unlawful entry into or attack upon either your dwelling, your curtilage, and we won't go into that. We spend a whole show talking about what the hell curtilage is, or your occupied motor vehicle. You can use deadly force in Indiana, according to the self-defense statute. You can use deadly force to prevent or terminate an unlawful attack on or entry into your occupied motor vehicle. So under the strict letter of the law, if what that person was doing could reasonably be described as an unlawful entry into or attack on your vehicle, or if you could establish that you reasonably believe that deadly force was necessary to prevent serious bodily injury to you, then the use of deadly force is justified. I will tell you, having said that, that is the strict letter of the law, that road rage situations are notoriously bad in terms of the scenarios where you want to be using deadly force in self-defense. Because I think the gut level reaction of a lot of people is that both parties are at fault to some degree, or there's going to be an argument and a dispute over who was the initial aggressor. And there's another provision of the self-defense statute that says if you're the initial aggressor, you can't use force in self-defense. You lose your ability to use force in self-defense, any force, much less deadly force, if you're the initial aggressor or if you provoke the unlawful action. So road rage is just a bad scenario to get caught up in. I personally would never, ever, ever pull a gun unless I'd already determined that I was absolutely justified in using deadly force and I had no other alternative. If I don't see a weapon, if somebody's leaning in my car window, and I don't want to get punched in the face, I don't want to get assaulted through my window, but I'm going to deal with what he's doing in any way I have other than a gun unless it escalates from there, because it's just too difficult to establish that what you did was justified under the law. But under the strict letter of the law, if an unlawful entry or attack into your vehicle justifies the use of deadly force. Road rage is just a tough context in which to be making that argument, because a lot of us look at road rage and just say, you know what, I bet both these people are at fault. And that's the way I think a lot of prosecutors are going to look at it too. So it's a good way to get caught up in a criminal prosecution when guns become involved in road rage situations. And the cases, the court opinions are full of road rage situations where somebody just flashes a gun, points a gun. Well, we have statutes against intimidation with a deadly weapon. We have statutes against pointing a firearm. All those things come into play. Criminal recklessness. We had a caller talking about being prosecuted for criminal recklessness for pointing a gun at someone. None of that's good. All of that's bad. All of that's expensive. So I think, take a deep breath in any potential road rage situations, try to head it off, and try to de-escalate is the very best way to go there. All right, we're way late heading into the break, but we're going to take a break. And want you to join the discussion. We're going to talk to Clarence Mason of the Indiana State Trap Association here after the break. But join the discussion, 239-9393, 239-9393. Contact me on Twitter at Guy Relford or on the Gun Guy Facebook page, which is Gun Guy WIBC. We'll be right back. This is Guy Relford on the Gun Guy Show on 93 WIBC.
Your rights, your responsibilities, your guns. This is the Gun Guy with Guy Relford on 93 WIBC.
And welcome back. I'm Guy Relford. This is the Gun Guy Show on 93 WIBC. Well, as I've been promising and forecasting here for a while, joining me in the studio is Clarence Mason of the Indiana State Trap Association. So, Clarence, welcome to the Gun Guy Show.
Thank you, Guy. Thanks for inviting us down.
Absolutely. Well, you guys have a pretty big event coming up. Tell our listeners about that.
Well, we have our 122nd Indiana State Championship shoots coming up starts on July the 5th and will run through July the 10th. And like I said, trap shooting is one of the oldest sports and one of the most popular clay shooting sports. And we're really fortunate here in Indiana. There are really good shoots all around us. Ohio's completing their state shoot as we speak. And I've been to Illinois, I've been to Kentucky, been to Michigan, been all the shoots. But Indiana has its own special flavor. It's kind of a big family picnic with trap going on.
That's awesome. Well, now let's take a step back. And for folks who may not be familiar, what exactly are we talking about when we talk about trap? And how is trap different from, say, skeet or sporting clays?
Well, in skeet, you stand in a semicircle, and you have what's called a high house and a low house, and the targets come out and cross. And as you go from these positions on the semicircle, you shoot at two targets, either one coming towards you, one going away, and then some crossing. Mm-hmm. In sporting clays, you shoot at two targets, and your first shot and the report from your gun may make the second target launch. And it might bounce along the ground to simulate a rabbit. It might go up in the air to simulate ducks over your head or something. Whereas trap is very structured. You have 5 shooting posts. You shoot out over a trap. The targets leave the trap house at around 42 to 43 miles an hour. They're supposed to be about 10 feet high at so many feet in front of the trap house. And you shoot from post 1 and go in order to 2 to 3 to 4 and to 5, depending on where you start. So it has similarities to skeet. It has similarities to sporting clays, but it is its own unique sport.
Okay, now your event coming up here now in July, that's going to be at the Indiana Gun Club, I believe, is it not?
Yes, it is. The Indiana Gun Club is over just east of Oleo Road on 113th Street, about a mile east of Oleo Road. It has a Fortville address, I believe, but it's obviously a suburb of Fishers.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard to miss. You go along there, you'll see the big signs, and then you drive back into the parking areas.
And I'll tell you what, if you listen to WIBC during the day, during Tony Katz's show in particular, he talks about the Indiana Gun Club. It's a great place. I've bought several guns out there. The shotgun shooting I've done historically has all been self-defense oriented. I'm focused on potentially shooting bad guys, not necessarily clay pigeons, but I'm infatuated with this. And one thing that I was excited to hear about from you, Clarence, as we talked about coming on the show today, is this isn't just for members. People from members of the public can actually show up at this event, can they not?
Yes, we're encouraging. In fact, we have something called Spectator Experience. You can go to Facebook and find on Facebook.com. That's ITA Spectator Experience. We're encouraging families to participate, and you can come and watch. And joining the ATA, the Amateur Trap Association, is the only requirement, and you can go and shoot in a registered event. I wouldn't recommend it if you're at all competitive, because you're going to have the very best shooters in the state and from neighboring states out there competing. In fact, in some of the big events, you can miss one target and you basically turned it into a practice. So.
Now, but however, in some of the events, there are classes, are there not? So you can actually, if you're an amateur or rookie, if you're like me, and I absolutely classify myself in terms of trap. I've never shot trap in my life, so if I just rolled in out there and said, you know what, I want to try this, what is there a comfortable way for me to get involved in the sport?
Absolutely. I wouldn't recommend going to the state shoot as a beginner, but any of the clubs, there are several excellent clubs here in central Indiana. Fall Creek Conservation Club, the Indiana Gun Club that we've already talked about, Brownsburg on the west side. You can go all the way to Rochdale. You can go, Rushville has a great club. Go there and tell them you're a new shooter, and people will show you the ropes. As far as joining the ATA, it's $20 for an annual membership. Once you are a member, you will be assigned to D class. And at 20 yards for handicap shooting, and probably D class for double shooting. And then you progress from there. As you go up, you can go from D to C to B to A to double A. And there is a triple A category that would be, we don't call them professionals, but in golf we call teaching pros. Mm-hmm. And people with the triple A classification, 27-yarders, do teach and coach. They are essentially professionals at the trap shooting sport. And as far as competitiveness, you can shoot against yourself, your own best scores, or you can shoot against your buddy for a Coke or whatever.
You bet.
Or you can load up and go shoot against the best in your category or in your class. We do have categories. We have veterans, people 65 years or older, not yet 70. We have senior vets who are 70 and older. Sub-vets are under the veterans. Then there's lady shooters, lady twos, which is a little bit older lady shooters. And then there's all the junior class, the kid shooters, junior gold, sub-juniors, gold. You can find a category or a class that you'll be competitive in and have a lot of fun.
Well, anybody interested in attending the state meet, how would they go about doing that?
Well, there's no prerequisites. But there is a target requirement. When you go in and sign up at the state shoot, you'll go through what they call classification. And they'll assign you to a class based on your shooting history or on your known ability. If somebody knows you as a guy, you might get classified a little higher just because they know of your expertise in this field.
Yeah, until they saw me shoot trap, I'm sure, but yeah.
Well, I heard about you shooting with the 18-inch gun. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
But no, when you go, you would join, you would get classified. From classification, you would go to squatting, and you'd be on a shooting squad. Someone, and the safety rules are pretty explicit. You've been around gun ranges forever. Mm-hmm. They're not a whole lot different on a trap range. You keep the gun open until it's your turn to fire. You make sure everybody knows that gun is either carried breech-wise open, or if it's a pump gun or a automatic gun, make sure the bolt's open and carried so that everybody can see there's nothing in it. And then there's this phenomena called spraying. Remember when you're kids and you go hunting with Dad and you carry the gun over the crook of your arm? You'll see some shotgunners doing that, and they get quickly adjusted right. About spraying.
Now, you were telling me about one particular event that's part of the state meet, which is one and out. This sounds really fun to me. Tell our listeners about that.
It's called a missing out.
Missing out. I'm sorry, I knew that.
Missing out. They even supply the shells for you. Federal, Devin Harris, who's the federal ammunition rep here locally, they'll hand you a shell, and you stand at the 27-yard line and post 3 and shoot. And if you miss, you go home. You can watch the rest of the shoot.
Miss and out.
Yes.
Yeah, got it.
If you hit, you stay in with the group of others that also hit, and they'll start off on 4 or 5 traps, because there's usually, I think last year we had over 300 shooters involved in this. Mm-hmm. They weed them down till you end up with 9 or 10 shooting probably at 33 or 35 yards, sometimes even from another trap. I just participated in Illinois where I went through 4 layers, and the guy running it took his hat off and threw it on the ground, and it was probably 35 yards. And we stood at the hat and shot, and I missed, and then I went and watched with everybody else.
Now, is the missing out open to the public, or is that?
You must participate in at least one ATA registered event at the Indiana Shoot. And then there's no other cost other than that. You sign up on a sheet, and they'll announce your name. But there's some tremendous prizes offered this year. There's over, I think, $1,000 of extra money that will be divided up amongst the places. Plus, there's an excellent Beretta A400 gun donated by our friends at the Indiana Gun Club.
Awesome.
Bill Baker and the people there that run Indiana Gun Club.
Which is a great gun shop.
Yes, it is. And this missing out was kind of experimented with a couple of years ago, but each year it has grown. I look forward to taking part in it, and I think about everybody at the shoot does. And it's something kind of fun to watch because you'll see people using a 2 3/4 dram, probably a 7.5 lead shot, ounce and an eighth, break targets at in excess of 35 yards beyond the trap house.
Right.
So it's a fun event to watch, and some of the kids are better at it than us old guys.
That's awesome. Is there a place online or anything where people can find out more about it?
There's lots of places. We could start with indianatrap.com. That would there's a directory there of gun clubs throughout Indiana. There's also a registered shoot information that would be for more advanced folks. This Facebook page for Indiana Spectator Experience on Facebook, it's ITA Spectator Experience, would be good for beginners just wanting to get interested in it. There are a number of family events that those people have planned. And then the granddaddy website of all is the ATA website called shootata.com, where you can find out information about shoots nationally in addition to the Indiana shoot. There's a find a club, find a shoot spot on that.
Awesome.
It's also where all of us who shoot registered trap, our registered scores are maintained, and you can actually print out your record if you needed to go show it to a classification committee what you think your average is.
Oh, great! Now tell one more time what's the date for the annual event, the state meet?
It is July the 5th. It starts on the 5th. That's basically what we call a fun day. It's also AIM, which is the academics, integrity, and marksmanship. It's the youth shooters that shoot their championship that day, although they participate throughout the week. Then starting Wednesday, we'll have singles, handicap, and doubles. Thursday is a 200 singles shoot, and then Friday is a handicap and doubles. Saturday is another 200 state championship, 200 singles championship. The director's handicap follows that. Then Sunday is a handicap state championship with the doubles championship on that same day. And by that time, you've shot 1,400 rounds.
Wow.
And your shoulder's a little tired, and you're ready to go to the next shoot.
All right. Well, hey, thanks for joining us so much on the Gun Guy Show tonight. Appreciated you being here. We're going to head into the break. We'll be right back. This is Guy Relford on the Gun Guy Show on 93 WIBC.
Now you've got a gun guy. Guy Relford on 93 WIBC.
And welcome to the Gun Guy Show on 93 WIBC. And we're going to continue to take your calls. Thanks to Clarence Mason from the Indiana State Trap Association for joining us on the show. As Clarence was leaving the studio just now, he turned and he said, Guy, what do you think the fastest growing high school sport is in the country? And I said, well, I'm guessing it has something to do with trap, or you wouldn't be asking me about it. And he said, yeah, trap, because high schools are actually starting trap teams and allowing them to compete as part of a high school trap team. How cool is that? And how contrary to what we typically see from schools, including in Indiana, is that where we're talking about an organized activity involving firearms that our high school students can become involved in. That's awesome. That's neat. And you know what? More and more schools need to look at that. We need to get that into the Indianapolis area. Now, do I see IPS doing that anytime soon? No, of course not. But the area schools, we need to look more and more at this because that's a neat opportunity. So thanks again. All right, well, let's get back into our general discussion. And one thing I wanted to mention on the show tonight, I don't know how many of you people saw that, but if there's confusion and uncertainty about short-barreled shotguns in Indiana right now, I want to make sure that we're fixing that. And why do I say that? To my great chagrin, on Friday morning, just yesterday morning, I got messaged very early in the morning about a newscast that had appeared in Fort Wayne television station. They call it 21 Alive, and for whatever reason, they also call it NBC 33. So I don't know if it has two different channels or how that functions up there, but it's based out of Fort Wayne. And these folks had run a story where they said, there are several new laws going into effect July 1 in Indiana. And one of the new laws going into effect is that we are going to again make short-barreled shotguns illegal in Indiana. And if you followed what's has happened with short-barreled shotguns here over the last year or so, is we had a law go into effect last July 1 of 2015, that decriminalized short-barreled shotguns. And I talked about it on my show at the time, or soon thereafter, because I wanted people to understand that, okay, Indiana was repealing its statute that makes it a crime to possess a shotgun with a barrel less than 18 inches. And Indiana had that on the books for quite some time. It was a crime under Indiana law, felony, to possess a shotgun with a barrel less than 18 inches, called a short-barreled shotgun, what some people refer to as a sawed-off shotgun. It didn't have to be sawed off. It could have been manufactured that way originally, but it was illegal if it had a barrel less than 18 inches. Separately, we have the whole National Firearms Act at the federal level that says you can own a short-barreled shotgun, as well as a short-barreled rifle, a suppressor, a fully automatic firearm if you go through the process. But we had for years and years and years, we had a statute in Indiana that even if you went through the federal process or tried to go through the federal process to pay your $200, get a tax stamp to own a short-barreled shotgun, you weren't going to be successful in that because we had a state statute against it. Well, we repealed that effective July 1st, 2015. You still have to go through the federal NFA process. You still have to pay for your tax stamp and file your Form 1 to make or your Form 4 to transfer an NFA item to acquire or make a short-barreled shotgun. But if you did that after the repeal of the statute last year, you're now legal. I actually have a pending Form 1 right now to make a short-barreled shotgun. It's pending with ATF right now. So much to my chagrin, I see this news story that says, well, the legislature has essentially changed its mind, and effective July 1, 2016, short-barreled shotguns are now going to be illegal in Indiana again. And my reaction to that, first of all, was, well, that can't be right. Wouldn't I know about that? I mean, I'm the gun guy, for crying out loud. Wouldn't I know about that? If we were essentially recriminalizing short-barreled shotguns? And I very closely studied all the pending bills we had in the General Assembly that had anything to do with guns this year. And some I was very much in support of, like constitutional carry. And Jim Lucas's other bill about allowing guns on some state property, including state universities. And there were several others. But I didn't see anything about recriminalizing short-barreled shotguns. And this news account was they didn't equivocate on it. They didn't say it was a possibility. They said, oh no, new statute goes into effect July 1. So I contacted the reporter through Twitter, and I sent an email to both the news director and the general manager of the station. I said, where'd you get your information on the fact that short-barreled shotguns are going to be illegal effective July 1? There's been no such bill that was even introduced, much less passed. But that had to come from somewhere. I want to know where you got your information. And lo and behold, late morning, and all these conversations were going on very early. Late morning, we get an email that says, well, we're looking into this. The reporter may have misread something. And then about an hour later, we got a retraction, and they say, well, we apologize for the error. So I don't know if they just made it up. I don't know if they were fed some bad information, say an anti-gun group. I don't know what the issue was, but there was a hell of a lot of confusion because people were posting and reposting and sharing the link for their news story that said very unequivocally, short-barreled shotguns are becoming illegal in Indiana again, effective July 1. And there are people that have already made, with permission from the federal government, their short-barreled shotguns who said, what am I going to do now? I got to throw this thing in a river. I got to bury it. I got to cut it up. What am I supposed to do now? I spent $200. I got a tax stamp because now these things are illegal again. And the whole thing, if you didn't already know this, and if you saw that news story, because it was spread around like wildfire through the gun community, people took it as true. And I tried my best to debunk it, but it is absolutely not true. And hope everybody knows that. All right, we're going to head into a break. If you've called in, we're going to talk to you after the break. Join the discussion, 239-9393, 239-9393. This is Guy Relford on The Gun Guy Show on 93 WIBC.
He's a Second Amendment attorney. He's an N.R.A. certified firearms instructor. He's the gun guy. Guy Relford on 93 WIBC.
And welcome back. I'm Guy Relford, and this is the Gun Guy Show on 93 WIBC. And lastly tonight, we're heading into the end of the show here, but I don't know how many folks have seen the fact that the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, just released the results of a new study on gun violence in America. And if you remember, there was a big dispute of whether the CDC should be doing research on gun violence. And the CDC had pretty much shown its stripes in previous years that it had an agenda when it came to gun control. And groups, including the N.R.A., questioned whether the CDC should really be doing this kind of research. And there was a fight in Congress over whether they should be funded to do this research. Well, as part of Obama's executive orders in January, he directed the Centers for Disease Control to conduct studies on the effects of gun violence. And clearly, what Obama and the other members of the left and anti-gun crowd expected the CDC to come out with was going to be anti-gun and to generate data or statistics or arguments or whatever it might be for why guns should be limited or access to guns should be limited or why we need more gun control. And we've seen other members of the medical community come out and say, oh, we have a national health crisis due to guns, which is a complete farce because overall gun violence is down. Gun homicides are down 49% since a peak in 1993. Well, lo and behold, the CDC came out, and what did they actually say? They some of their conclusions say things like armed citizens are less likely to be injured by an attacker. Well, we know that. That's why we're gun owners. But the gun control folks dispute it. They quantified the number of defensive gun uses, and it's thousands and thousands and thousands, ranging from 500,000 to over 3 million per year. How important is that? And there are a lot of other statistics. There's also a great Breitbart article out on this that you really should check out. But I point you to that study. It came out and it bit Obama right in the hindquarters because it didn't say what he thought it was going to say when he ordered it be done. Well, we're at the end of the Gun Guy Show. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you come back next week. This is Guy Relford on the Gun Guy Show on 93 WIBC.